Hello and welcome to Walking the Wyrd. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm in Oxfordshire for the first time. I've come to have a look at two different points of interest. We're going to check out the oldest chalk hill figure in the whole of the UK, the Uffington White Horse, and then we're going to have a look at Waylands Smithy, which is a Neolithic chambered long barrow with connections to Norse mythology and a mysterious blacksmith. Look at these views, aren't they magnificent? So I'm next going to head northeast in that direction over there in search of the Uffington White Horse and also Dragon Hill. It's all looking very beautiful and look at this. So just ahead you can just about make out the Uffington White Horse, and on the left here we can see Dragon Hill. Dragon Hill is supposed to be where St. George slayed the dragon, and the folklore has that the dragon died on Dragon Hill, hence its name, and its blood seeped into the soil and poisoned the earth, so nothing ever grows on Dragon Hill. Here we are on the very spot where it is said that St. George killed the dragon. I guess this is where folklore says the dragon fell, where nothing will grow. This is one of those walks where every time I turn around there's a different view. It's just so gorgeous up here. Okay, so leaving Dragon Hill and we're going to go and have a look at the White Horse. Okay, here we go. Do you know what? I'm not going to do the stairs. I'm going to do the slope. That's easier. So that is the extent of the view from the top, so I think we need to take to the skies.
The Uffington White Horse has been galloping across the ancient Oxfordshire countryside since the Bronze Age. Its survival of over 3,000 years can be attributed to the deep chalk-filled trenches that the Celtic people created. 150 generations of dedicated people have diligently maintained the horse by trimming back the overgrowth of vegetation and rechalking the figure every few years. Exactly why the Uffington White Horse was created still remains somewhat of a mystery.
So the Uffington White Horse is believed to have been carved by our Celtic ancestors in the late Bronze Age, dating it to around 1380 to 550 BC. They've discovered that quite recently, as in, well, 1995. That's the exact date that they put to it with new archaeological technology. Some are made just by scraping the surface of the grass and the vegetation away to reveal the soil, and then under that the chalk layer, which is common around the south coast of the UK. And some, like the Uffington White Horse, are actually trenched, so they literally cut trenches into the earth right down to the chalk layer, and these ones seem to last a lot longer because they've got that depth. And there's supposed to be hundreds of these chalk hill carvings up and down the country, but many of them have been lost to overgrowth of vegetation, or the chalk has got dirty with soil, and so sadly can no longer be seen. So the burning question is probably, why are there so many chalk hill figures in the UK? Theories range from spiritual reasons, such as deity worship, particularly with the horses. It could be gods and goddesses of horses, like Epona, or it's territorial boundary markers. Essentially, if a different tribe came to these hills, they would know who owns the area. Although it's quite understandable that you can't, sadly, walk on the Uffington White Horse anymore because of damage, it's a shame, because it was said in local folklore that if you stood on the eye of the horse and made a wish, it would come true. So we're going to leave White Horse Hill now and head even further back in time to the Neolithic period, and we're going to go and check out Waylands Smithy.
Dating to around 3500 BC, the Neolithic chambered long barrow of Waylands Smithy was built by our ancestors to house their dead. Neolithic man was moving away from its former hunter-gatherer lifestyle and was beginning to settle and farm larger areas of land. This change also saw a new way for people to bury their loved ones, and long barrows provided the perfect sacred space for communal burials. The Saxons named the long barrow Waylands Smithy after Wayland, a supernatural blacksmith from Germanic mythology.
Historians believe that the Neolithic people carried out a process called excarnation before placing the bodies in the tombs. Excarnation involves leaving the body of the deceased out in the open, so ideally on top of like a capstone, like you could here, just anywhere out in the air, and the animals and the birds and the elements would take away obviously the skin and the tissue and most of the body, and then the bones, the major bones like the skulls and the femurs, would be gathered up and taken into the tomb for burial. Archaeologists discovered wear and tear on the bones, which showed that the bones were moved in and out of the tomb over a period of time. So it looks like, again, like at West Kennet Long Barrow, that our ancestors brought their deceased in and out of the tomb to take part in rituals and ceremonies and community gatherings. So you can see there, it's all blocked up, but that's the main chamber that goes all the way back to the end of the long barrow, and that's where the skeletons were found. And then it's got two chambers either side. This is the capstone, and you've got another chamber here. So it's kind of in a crucifix shape. Got the long piece and then two smaller chambers each side of the opening. And then the whole chamber is flanked by these smaller sarcens all the way down on both sides. You can imagine when it was complete it would have been quite a sight. So who is Wayland the Smith? Well, he actually appears in Norse mythology. His story can be found in the Poetic Edda under the poem of Wayland, Wayland obviously being Germanic for what the Saxons called Wayland.
Wayland the Smith was a supernatural blacksmith, possibly an elf. He and his brothers married Valkyries and lived happily together for many years until the Valkyries were called back to Odin to serve him on the battlefield. Heartbroken, Wayland's brothers went to search for their missing wives, while Wayland remained at the forge, burying his heartache in his work. A king named Neolithic took advantage of Wayland's vulnerability and captured him so that he could work for the king in his royal forge. Over many years, Wayland grew ever vengeful and plotted his revenge on the king's family. Tricking the king's sons to peer into a chest with the sharpest of edges, he cleanly sliced their heads off with the lid and forged their skulls into silver goblets for the king. Wayland then went on to seduce and impregnate the king's daughter before forging some wings so that he could fly away from his captor.
His smithery skills seem to be renowned because he appears in many poems, Old English poems, and many pieces of literature. And whenever it's mentioned, I think Alfred the Great also mentioned him. Basically, iron forged by Wayland was the finest you could get. So when the Saxons came across the Neolithic tomb, they thought, you know what, this looks like this could be Wayland's forge from the poem of Wayland that they'd obviously heard of. The local folklore reflects the fact that the Saxons believed this was Wayland the Smith's forge. It is said that any traveller whose horse needs shoeing could leave the horse at the entrance of the tomb along with a coin. Overnight, Wayland, the mysterious blacksmith, who you will never see, will do his work, and when you return, the horse will be newly shod and the coin will be missing. In reflection of this, people started leaving coins over the years here as sort of like an offering, I suppose, to Wayland. But they were damaging trees because people were sinking them into trees and things like that. So that's highly discouraged now. Definitely has this heavy kind of oppressive atmosphere here. It's really strange, almost like you're not very welcome somehow.
Go to the smithy, the one you built. There you'll find bellows spattered with blood. I cut off the heads of your young cubs, and in the mud of the forge I laid their limbs.